"Mark, this table is for family. You can find a spot outside." My cousin laughed as the others grinned. The waiter dropped a $3,000 bill in front of me. I took a sip of my coffee and chuckled. They had no idea who was covering it tonight. I always knew my family didn't think much of me. Growing up, I was the odd one out, quiet kid who didn't fit into their mold. While my cousins boasted about their weekend parties and expensive clothes, I was the nerd who spent his time learning, working, and planning a way out. I wasn't interested in impressing anyone, least of all my arrogant, self-absorbed relatives. His fate would have it. I ended up making it. I worked my ass off, built something for myself, and made more money than any of them ever had. Not that they cared, or rather not that they admitted they cared. They just pretended my success didn't exist until they saw a way to benefit from it, which brings us to tonight. I hadn't planned on seeing them. In fact, I'd spent years avoiding these family gatherings because they were always the same condescending remarks, fake smiles, and constant reminders that no matter what I achieved, I'd always be just Mark to them, black sheep. But my mother, bless her heart, practically begged me to come. Just one dinner, Mark, for me. It's been years. I caved. I regretted it. The second I walked into that overpriced steakhouse, the entire extended family was already seated at a long camelette table, laughing and talking like something out of a movie. My cousin Jason, my biggest tormentor growing up, was in the center, grinning like he owned the place. The moment his eyes landed on me, that grin widened. Who decided to show up? Jason leaned back in his chair, his voice loud enough to turn a few heads. "Didn't think you had time for us, big shot." I forced a polite smile and pulled out a chair near the end of the table. Jason frowned. "Sorry, Mark, but that seat's taken." I glanced around. The only empty seats were next to Jason or his equally smug sister Rachel. I reached for a different chair, but Rachel rolled her eyes. "That one too." I blinked. "You're kidding." Jason chuckled and leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Mark, this table is for family. You can find a spot outside." Laughter, not from everyone but from enough people to make my jaw tighten. My mother looked uncomfortable, but she didn't say anything. She never did. My aunt smirked. My uncle shook his head like I was some embarrassing joke, and Jason looked pleased with himself. I should have left. Instead, I smiled outside. I said, "Now I'll stay." I grabbed an empty chair from a nearby table and dragged it over, placing it just outside the main group, but still close enough that I was technically at the table. A waiter came over, looking uncertain, but I just waved him off and ordered a coffee. Jason and Rachel shared a look. They didn't argue, not yet. Then the real show began. I wasn't stupid. I knew why they wanted me here. They didn't care about catching up, they cared about flexing all throughout dinner. They made a show of ordering the most expensive things on the menu. "I'll take the Wagyu," Jason announced, flipping the menu shut, "and the lobster, and another round of drinks for everyone." He shot me a smirk. "We're celebrating after all." "Rachel Grant, we should really enjoy ourselves tonight." "Desserts too," my uncle chimed in. "Get the most expensive ones." The waiters kept coming and the bill kept climbing. I said nothing. I just sipped my coffee, watching them with an amused expression. Then when the plates were empty, the wine glasses drained, everyone was lounging back with satisfied sighs. The waiter arrived with the bill, $32.47. He placed it directly in front of me. Jason stretched lazily. "You got this right, Mark?" Rachel giggled. "Come on, it's nothing to you." Silence. The entire table was looking at me now, waiting. I let the moment stretch, then slowly picked up the bill, glancing over it like I actually cared about the total. Then I chuckled, a soft, knowing sound. Jason frowned. "What's so funny?" I leaned back, took another sip of my coffee and grinned. I said, "You guys have no idea who's covering it tonight." And with that place, the bill backed down, right in front of Jason. Jason stared at the bill, blinking a few times as if trying to make sense of what just happened. I leaned back, looking completely at ease, watching the confusion spread across the table like wildfire. "Wait, you're serious?" Jason's voice dropped slightly, but there was a nervous edge to it now. His grin faltered, just for a second. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, another slow sip of my coffee, watching his expression shift from confusion to realization into something far darker. Rachel, noticing the change, gave Jason a quick notch. "Isn't your company doing well, Mark?" she asked sweetly, the edge of sarcasm nearly unnoticeable. "Surely a little dinner like this won't put a dent in your wallet." There it was. The expectation, the assumption that I had to pay for their indulgence, just because I was the successful one. They didn't care about the effort it took to get here. They didn't care that I busted my ass for years, building my own business from the ground up. All they cared about was the money they thought I should share with them. This wasn't just about money, no. This was about them thinking they could get away with treating me like dirt while benefiting from my success. Jason tried again, his voice now more forceful, though his smile was more a tight grimace. "Come on, Mark, you can afford it." He looked at the waiter and back at me, like he was about to give me one last chance to be the nice guy. "The bill is huge, but you're a businessman, right? Just swipe that card and call it a night." My mother, who had been silent up until now, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Mark, honey, please, it's just a dinner. It's a family gathering, and how they are." Her voice trailed off as if she was trying to keep the peace, but I could tell she wasn't entirely on their side. My mother had always been the peacemaker, the one who never wanted to rock the boat, but this time I could feel the frustration bubbling beneath the surface, the way she knew I was being taken advantage of, but didn't have the courage to say anything. I set the coffee cup down gently and looked around at the faces staring at me. My uncle, his big belly spilling over the top of his chair, was now leaning forward, his voice gruff. "Look, Mark, I don't know what's going on with you. Don't act like we don't know your situation. You've been making bank for months now. Don't be a child, pay the bill and let's go home." He was practically demanding it. Now, his tone cold and calculating. The others around the table nodded, some of them still grinning, others just waiting for me to buckle under the pressure. It was clear that they thought I would cave, that I would just pay to avoid the awkwardness, but I wasn't going to cave. Not this time, not after all these years of being belittled, of being the one they always mocked or ignored when it wasn't convenient for them. And it wasn't just that. No, there was something more satisfying about watching them score now that they had no idea what was coming. I smiled a little, not a big proud grin like Jason, but a small, almost playful smile. "All right," I said, my voice calm and controlled. "I'll pay the bill." Chorus of relieved sighs echoed around the table, some of them even clapping me on the back like I just won some moral victory. But I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. Jason's face lit up. "See, that wasn't so hard, was it?" He gave a mock salute. "Thanks, big shot." I leaned forward, my smile never faltering. "Nah, I changed my mind. Good luck, guys." The silence at the table was instant, like someone had pressed the mute button for a moment. No one moved, no one said a word. Jason's face shifted from confidence to something darker. He opened his mouth to protest, but I was already standing up, reaching for my jacket. I wasn't going anywhere just yet, but I wanted them to feel the tension rising. "By the way," I added, my voice low, "if you don't want to be responsible for this big check, you might want to think about how much you order next time." Jason's eyes were wide now. No longer the confident cousin who always took advantage of me. His jaw clenched, and he glanced around the table, clearly unsure what to do. He'd expected me to be the punching bag again. Instead, I was setting the rules for once. Turned to leave the table, walking slowly, knowing full well they would follow the script I had set up. The waiter was still standing there waiting for someone to take charge, and then I heard it. "Hey," Jason snapped. I didn't let him finish. "I'll be over there," called back, gesturing to the lounge area a few feet away out of sight from the main dining room. "Just let me know when you figured it out." I walked away. I could feel the tension in the air as I made my way to the lounge. They didn't know how to handle it. They thought they could push me, guilt, trip me. I just fold like I always had. This time I wasn't going to play their game, the arrogance, the entitlement. They were about to learn a lesson they wouldn't forget anytime soon. As I sank into the plush chair, I glanced back toward the dining area. Jason was standing there now, nervously adjusting his collar, talking in hushed tones with Rachel and my mother. Their voices were barely audible from where I sat, but I could make out a few words. "Mark's not going to. He'll pay. Don't make him mad. We need him for the bill." "Do we have enough?" The desperation was obvious. They were trying to figure out who could cover what, calculating how much they could possibly scrape together without actually reaching into their own pockets. They were about to learn that this time I wasn't going to be their backup. Minutes passed. I checked my phone, acting like I didn't have a care in the world. But every few seconds I glance over just to catch a glimpse of their panic. The waiter was lingering nearby, probably giving them the side eye, waiting for them to make a decision. The longer this went on, the more obvious it became that they were in over their heads. It wasn't long before Jason made his way over to me, looking as if he just walked into a room filled with hot coals. His face was a mixture of frustration and something close to guilt. I stayed seated, taking my time before looking up at him. "What's up?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. He exhaled sharply, trying to hold it together. "Mark, this isn't funny. The bill is way higher than we thought. Can you just help us out this time? We're family, right?" I couldn't help but let out a small chuckle. "I'm not laughing, Jason. I'm serious. You guys wanted this meal. You ordered whatever you wanted without asking if I was cool with it. And now you're asking me to foot the bill for the wine, for everything." He paused, swallowing hard. "Look, man, we didn't realize it was going to be like this. It's just dinner, right? Can't you just help out?" I leaned back in the chair, letting his words hang in the air for a moment. This was the same tired act they always pulled. No self-awareness, no accountability. They didn't care about me. They just cared about my money. "Jason, I'm done playing this game," I said finally. "You're all grown-ups, right? You can afford to pay for your own meals. I'm not your bank anymore. I don't care if you're my family. That doesn't mean I owe you. Anything. His expression shifted from desperation to something more defensive, his eyes narrowing. You're going to let us pay for all of this after everything we've done for you? After all, the times we've been there for you? I shot him a flat look. What you mean all the times? You've asked me to pay for everything while you sat back and acted like I owed you something that doesn't count as being there for me, Jason. Behind him, Rachel and my mother were watching closely. I could tell they were growing more and more anxious by the second. They knew this wasn't going how they'd planned. I could see the wheels turning in Rachel's head, probably trying to figure out some way to manipulate the situation. My mom, on the other hand, more panicked than I'd ever seen her. We can't just leave, can we? Rachel's voice was high-pitched, now cracking with stress. We're not going to just walk away from a $3,000 bill. That would be insane. I raised an eyebrow. No one's walking away. Rachel, you guys are staying and paying? I'm done with the charade. I don't care if you're my family. You've been taking advantage of me for years, and I'm done. Jason's face was turning red. Now frustration bubbling up to the surface. Can't be serious. You're just going to let us suffer here. We're stuck with the bill, and I'm stuck with the bill. You think I'm the one who made those choices? I interrupted. You all decided what you were ordering. You made the choices, now live with the consequences. Rachel opened her mouth to argue, but my mother cut her off, her voice trembling. Mark, please, this isn't the time for this. We're family, remember, just help us out. You can afford it. Her words hung in the air like a weight. They knew I could afford it. That's the thing. They knew how much I was making, how successful I become. They never saw that success is something I'd earned. No, they just saw it as an opportunity to mooch off me. I stood up slowly, straightening my jacket. No, I can't afford it. Mom, you can, Jason can, Rachel can, but I'm not covering your mess this time. I turned toward the waiter who had been hovering nearby, clearly aware of what was going on. I caught his eye and gave him a quick nod, signaling that I was done. And just like that, I walked toward the exit, not looking back. I heard the murmurs as I stepped out of the lounge and into the cool evening air. I didn't look back. The sound of footsteps following me made my pace slow, but I wasn't about to turn around. They dug their own hole. Now it was time to see how deep they'd have to dig to get out of it. It wasn't long before I reached the parking lot, my hands stuffed in my pockets. As I stood there staring at my car, I could hear the clatter of heels approaching, and then Rachel's voice calling my name. Mark, wait. I didn't respond. My heart rate was steady. I was calm, but I could hear her desperation, how she was trying to pull me back into their drama. I didn't want to play this game anymore. Mark, she called again, her voice shaking. Can't just leave. Please, this is serious. I turned around, cutting her off mid-sentence. You think I don't know what's serious, Rachel? You think I don't know exactly what you're doing? She stopped in her tracks, and for a moment there was silence. The wind wrestled through the trees, and I could feel the tension between us. She was struggling to find words, but I wasn't going to let her, not this time. You've been using me for years, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Every time something comes up, it's Mark. Cover this. It's never, hey Mark, how are you? It's always been about what I can do for you. I'm done. Her eyes flickered. I could see the guilt flash across her face before she quickly masked it with an angry expression. You can't just leave us hanging like this. She snapped, her voice growing louder. We need you. You can't just walk away from family when we're in a tough spot. I felt my jaw tighten, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'm not walking away from family, Rachel. I'm walking away from your entitlement. This isn't family. This is manipulation. I'm done letting you use me for a moment. She just stood there, her face flushed, trying to figure out what to say next, but before she could respond, I saw Jason and my mom emerged from the restaurant. Looking frantic, Jason's shirt was half untouched. He looked like he'd been running. My mom's expression was a mixture of guilt and panic, eyes wide as she spotted me standing there. Just out of reach, Mark. Please, we don't know what we're going to do, my mom said, her voice cracking. We can't afford this. You're the only one who can help us. Her words hit me, but not in the way she expected. I felt a strange, almost detached satisfaction as I watched their desperation unfold. They had pushed me for so long, and now they were realizing that there was a cost to everything. You think I'm just going to bail you out again? I asked, my voice more quiet now. You think this is just about money? This is about respect. This is about recognizing that I've worked my ass off to get where I am. And you can't just keep using me when things don't go your way. Jason took a step forward, hands held out, pleading. Mark, come on, don't do this, we're family. You've got to understand, this isn't just about the money. It's about— No, Jason, I cut him off, my tone hard now. It's always been about the money for you. The second you thought I'd pay, you stopped considering me as a person. You saw me as an ATM. I could see Jason's face red, and as he struggled, for words, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. It was as if he couldn't believe this was happening, like he couldn't comprehend that I wasn't just going to fold under pressure. I glanced at my mom, who was looking more frantic now. Her eyes started between me and the restaurant, probably wondering if I was going to come back in and solve the problem for them. But I wasn't, not this time. "You've made your bed, now you lie in it," I said, turning away. "I'm done here." Before they could say anything else, I opened the door to my car and slid in. I started the engine, the low hum of the car filling the silence between us. I could see their figures in my rear view mirror, still standing there, frozen in disbelief. But I wasn't about to feel bad for them. They had their chance. They always had their chance. As I drove off, I felt this strange sense of liberation. For once, I wasn't being the sucker. I wasn't the one who was going to get used. And as the restaurant faded into the distance, I knew I had made the right choice. They had pushed too far. Now it was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. I hadn't gotten far when my phone buzzed, and I knew instantly it was them. I didn't bother answering them call, let them text. I wasn't picking up anymore, but they didn't give up. They didn't just let it go. By the time I reached home, there were 6 missed calls from my mom, from Jason, in a text from Rachel that read, "Mark, we're really sorry. Please come back. We'll pay you back. Please don't leave us like this." I stared at the text for a long moment, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, but I didn't reply. I didn't need to. They had no idea just how badly they'd miscalculated. I tossed my phone on the couch and grabbed a beer from the fridge. It was quiet in my apartment. I could hear the faint sound of traffic outside the soft of the refrigerator and nothing else. The silence felt so much better than the chaos I just walked away from. But as the minutes passed, I started to feel this odd mix of satisfaction and something else, relief. Maybe it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about finally standing up for myself, something I'd never truly done with him. Just then I heard the sound of my phone buzzing again. I glanced over. It was another text from Rachel. This time it was short, and to the point. "Can't pay the bill. It's $3,000. Please help." That was it. I stared at the message for a long time. It felt almost unreal. $3,000. The same amount they casually dropped on me earlier, thinking it was no big deal. I thought about how they had expected me to cover it all, how they had planned their night around me picking up the check like it was nothing. I didn't feel sorry for them, not at all. I sat back down on the couch, cracking, opened the beer and watched the screen, waiting for the inevitable calls to follow. It was like clockwork. Not even 5 minutes later, the phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Jason. Picked it up. "Mark," he started, his voice thick with frustration. "Look, we get it. You're mad, but we need your help. We can't cover this. You have to help us." I could hear the desperation in his voice. Panic. It almost made me smile, but I held it in. "Jason, I already told you," I said. My voice, "Even you need to figure this out yourselves. You've got yourselves into this mess. It's not my problem." "But Mark, you don't understand. This is family." Jason snapped, his words rushing together. "You're just going to leave us to deal with this on our own? After everything we've been through?" "Everything we've been through," I repeated, incredulous. "You mean, the years of you all treating me like an ATM, the endless request for help that always came with strings attached? That's what you mean?" There was a pause on the other end, then a long sigh. "I didn't mean it like that, Mark. Please, we're not using you. We just need help." I said, "What I've been giving you isn't help, Jason, it's enabling." "And what? You'll figure it out. You're grown adults. If I keep bailing you out, you'll never learn." The silence that followed was heavy. He didn't argue anymore. I knew he understood what I was saying, even if he didn't want to admit it. "Good luck, Jason," I said, my tone colder now. "You'll need it." I hung up before he could say anything else. The rest of the night passed quietly. I enjoyed my beer, put on a movie, and let everything unfold. Sure enough, I got one last text from my mom. Reading, "Mark, please, if you're still upset, we'll make it up to you. Just please come back and pay the bill." But I didn't reply. They were on their own now. The next day, I learned they hadn't been able to pay the bill and had to make some embarrassing calls to their own friends for help. I heard they even had to take out a loan to cover part of it. The worst part, the manager of the restaurant had called them out for trying to play the family card and using people to cover their irresponsible spending. They were humiliated, and me, I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. In the end, the real payoff wasn't the money with the satisfaction of watching them struggle. It was the fact that for once I had taken control. I had finally drawn the line that was worth way more than any meal I could have paid for. I wasn't going to be their fool anymore. I had learned the hard way that sometimes the best way to love family was to let them stand on their own 2 feet, even if it meant they'd fall flat. I'd done my part. Now it was their turn to figure it out.